Today is part 3 of our series called Surprise the World, where we've been looking at how is it that everyday ordinary Christians can play a part in what's called evangelism. That means simply sharing your faith with others about what you believe and how to come into a relationship with Jesus. And what I've been sharing with you over these past couple of weeks is most people are very intimidated by that process because only 2% of Christians actually have the spiritual gift of evangelism. In other words, there's only 2% that it comes easy and naturally just to talk about Jesus to everybody. And for most people that have that spiritual gift, I actually happen to have that one. It's just comes clearly, it comes naturally, people respond to it. And by the way, there's about 23 or so spiritual gifts altogether. And so all of us have a spiritual gift. I have the 3 spiritual gifts of leadership, evangelism, and teaching. You have spiritual gifts, and I have spiritual gifts. And together, when we all operate in our spiritual gifts, that's what makes us then the body of Christ. So all of us are called to be evangelistic, but not everybody has the spiritual gift of evangelism. So what this series has been all about is, okay, what does the other 98% of people do? How do you go about actually being a witness for Jesus in your everyday life? And so what I've been sharing with you is really a strategy that the Apostle Peter and the Apostle Paul came up with, that they said, okay, here's what you can do. As an evangelistic believer, first of all, you pray. You pray that God will give you opportunity, or that God would give opportunities to people like myself to actually share faith. And you pray that when I get an opportunity like that it comes out clearly. So you're like, okay, that's good. I can pray for you. No problem. But remember, the other part of it is that you are to live, and I've been jokingly saying that you need to live a questionable lifestyle. Now, that's not a bad lifestyle in any way. What we're really saying with that is, look, you need to be living in such a way that other people look at you and they go, you know what? There's something really different about you. What do you have that I don't have? Because the peace that you have in your life right now as you're handling this situation, I wouldn't have it. Well, what do you have that I don't have? Or people look at you and they go, you know what? Everybody else is chasing after the things of the world. They're chasing after money and fame and power. And you just seem to have a contentment about you. What is it that gives you that contentment? And both Peter and Paul then say that when people ask you then for the hope like that you have inside, you need to be ready to give an answer for that. And so this whole series has been about, okay, how do you become a questionable believer? How do you get to the place where people are asking you all the time, what's different about you? Because whatever you have, I want. And what I've been sharing is, look, there's a couple habits that you could get into. And if you get these habits going and they become a rhythm of your life, then people are going to go, that's what's different. I see it now. And so I taught you, it's from Michael Frost's book, Surprise the World, which we're basing this series off of, a great acrostic that's called BELLS. And you're going to see it on the screen right now. BELLS simply stands for this. And we talked about back in week 1 that the B stands for what? Stands for blessed. And you remember, how many people are we supposed to bless every single week? 3, right? So you're going to bless somebody from here at Exponential. You're going to bless an unbeliever, somebody that doesn't yet have a relationship with Jesus. And then you get a wild card, right? You can sort of pick and choose who it is that you want to bless. But every week you should be getting into this habit of blessing other people. What do we call that here at Exponential? What's our big thing that we call blessing people? You matter, right? So every single week you should be finding ways, and actually really every single day you should find even little small things to show people, look, you matter to God and you matter to me as well. And you're going to bless people in ways that surprise them. And the more you surprise people, they're going to go, hey, that's different. Not everybody does that. What is it that's different about you? And then you see there on the screen, the letter E in BELLS stands for eat. And this was a good one, right? We talked about this one last week. Everybody amen that one. Because what we see with Jesus is that, as you read through the Gospels, he's always either eating, he's at a meal, he's on his way to a meal, or he's just come from a meal. And so we are to become more and more like Jesus. And so if Jesus' strategy for reaching unbelievers was through eating, then maybe that's what we should be doing as well. So what I said is, every single person, what you need to do is every week, make it a habit to eat with 3 people that are not your family members. So others, it could be a coworker, it may be a neighbor, it could be a friend. But what you want to do in that group of 3 there is make sure that at least one of them is not yet a follower of Jesus. And I said to you last week, look, that could be 3 separate meals that you have. It could be one meal with, all 3 of them there. But get in this habit of being very strategic with your eating. You're eating 21 meals a week. We're only asking you to take one or up to 3 meals and make it a little bit more evangelistic. Today, what we're going to do then is we're going to look at the two letter L's that you see there on the screen. And that is we're going to look at listen and learn. Before we do that, though, I do want to welcome those of you that are watching online with us. You see right now in the upper right-hand corner of your screen there's a little button called Talk Notes. If you'll press that, that's going to give you all the scriptures we're going to look at today, as well as all the fill in the blanks. For those of you that are live here in the room, welcome to you. If you go to your smartphone, you can go to exponential.church, and that'll pull up our digital program, and you'll be able to get access to the Talk Notes there as well. All right, so let's look at, what are these next steps that we need to take? So we're blessing people, we're eating with people. Let's talk about listening and learning. We'll obviously start with listen. So here's what I put on your outline. Listen means this: I must spend at least one period of the week listening for the Spirit's voice. Must spend at least one period of the week listening for the Spirit's voice. Now, the obvious question you have is, what in the world does that have to do with evangelism? I mean, blessing people, that makes sense. Eating with people, that makes sense. But like me just sitting and listening to the Spirit's voice, how's that going to make me surprising? How am I going to share my faith in that way? Why would people even question? Well, here's what you need to understand with that. Will there be times that the Spirit just randomly prompts you that, hey, you need to bless this person because you're at the grocery store, or hey, you ran into this person and you say, hey, let's go eat because the Spirit prompted you that this is somebody you should. Will that happen? Sure. But keep in mind that most evangelism happens in relationship. It's that you're intentionally building a relationship with somebody. And so what you need to do is you need to be intentionally praying. You need to be listening to the voice of the Spirit going, Spirit of God, who is it this week that you would have me to bless? Spirit of God, who is it that this week that you would have me to eat with? Who are those 3 people? And so you need to take some time, and I'm going to suggest about 20 minutes out of every week that you just have an intentional time that you sit there, you get still, you get quiet, you listen for the voice of the Spirit. Just going to listen. You're going, well, how's this different than prayer? Well, this is prayer, but this is what's called a listening prayer. Most of the time when we think of prayer, we think about us talking to God, don't we? That, God, I need this, and God, do this, and God, help this person, and whatever. And that's a part of prayer. You can present your request to God. But a major part of prayer is actually sitting and listening. And so you can make listening prayer a part of your everyday prayer life. But what I'm encouraging you here is take at least one 20-minute period every single week. Get rid of all the distractions. Get alone. Put your cell phone away. Actually, put it in a completely separate room so you're not tempted to look at it. Maybe you get in your house in a place that is quiet. Maybe you go out and you just take a walk through nature. But this is you just listening for the voice. You're not saying anything. You're just listening for the voice of the Spirit. Maybe the only thing that you say is at the very beginning, Spirit, reveal to me, who is it that this week you would have me to bless? Who is it this week that you would have me to eat with? You're just listening for a still small voice. Let's face it, our day-to-day, everyday life, we're constantly on the run. There's so much noise, right? Literal noise, and then just noise of just stuff that's going on. And a lot of people go, God never speaks to me. Well, he is, but you just can't hear him because he whispers to us. And so all these other noises and distractions are drowning out the voice of God. So you need to take these periods, this 20-minute period every single week, make it a habit in order to listen for his voice. Now, not only is he going to reveal to you who you need to bless and who you need to eat with, he's also going to point out some sin in your life. Remember, we're trying to be different so that people go, oh, you're so different. There's something about you. I want what you have. Well, if you're just sinning and doing what everybody else in the world is doing, that doesn't look any different. People aren't surprised by that. And so what the Spirit will reveal to you is, okay, here's the areas of your life that you need to change in order to be more like Jesus, so that people do look at you and go, wow, there's something different about you. So you're just listening for the Spirit to convict you of what it is that you have going on in your life. And here's the deal. It's not always even going to be like the big things, because a lot of people think, okay, it's going to be like you have an anger problem, or you have a drinking problem, or you have a lust problem, or a greed problem, or whatever. And the Spirit will reveal those types of things. But sometimes when it comes to like what we're talking about in this series about being on mission for Jesus, of being everyday evangelistic believers, sometimes what the Spirit is going to reveal to you and whisper to you is like what we'll call like these silent killers, these missional killers, things that you wouldn't even think of as being sin when it comes to sharing your faith. I'll give you a couple of examples. One would be fear. Spirit may reveal to you, you've got a spirit of fear going on right now. A fear of, if I start talking about Jesus, I may get persecuted for that. Or a fear of, if I talk about Jesus, people are going to make fun of me. Or maybe you have a fear that if you talk about Jesus, they're going to ask you a question you don't know how to answer. And so that keeps you from actually doing what it is that God has called you to do, which is to be a everyday evangelistic believer. And we read in Scripture that God has not given us a spirit of fear. He's given us a spirit of power and of love, of self-discipline. And so if you're thinking about sharing your faith and you're feeling some fear about that, that's coming directly from Satan. So you need to repent of that. So maybe the Spirit will reveal something like that to you. And so you gotta handle that. And you just confess it to God. And God says, if you confess your sins to me, I'm faithful and just to forgive you of your sins and to cleanse you from all of your unrighteousness. Or maybe the Spirit whispers to you and says, you know what, when it comes to being missional, you've gotten pretty lazy. And the laziness that I'm talking about here, it isn't a laziness like, oh, okay, you're just sitting on your sofa all the time, binge watching TV shows and, eating your Doritos and drinking your soda or whatever. Not that type of laziness. It's a laziness that the Spirit's going to whisper to you going, you know what, when it comes to caring for people, to helping people in their situation and their needs, you've gotten lazy in that. You haven't been doing your part. You've gotten to the place where you're going, okay, well, yeah, somebody needs to take care of that, but it'll be somebody else because I'm busy. I've got a lot of stuff going on in my life. And so that's somebody else's job to take care of. And so the Spirit may whisper these things that, fear or laziness or whatever, these missional killers, they're keeping us from being who it is that God wants us to be in order to make a difference for Him and for His glory. Here's something else that happens when you spend time with the Spirit like this. That is, you're going to get refreshed and you're going to get renewed. That 20-minute period, it is so valuable because, if you're actually doing the things that I'm talking about in this series of surprising the world by blessing people and eating with people, that is going to take some time. It is going to take some energy, mentally, emotionally, physically. And so if you're doing these things, you need to be able to get alone with the Spirit so the Spirit can bring you times of refreshing, to re-energize you, to give you a passion, again, to keep on going, keep doing what you're doing. You can't in life, whether it's like vocational things or ministry things, you can't just keep going and going and going and going. We need times that we get still. That's what, for us as American Christians, that's what Sundays are about. This is our Sabbath day, a day of rest to renew and recharge. But again, I'm encouraging you, take some time by yourself, 20 minutes. You're just sitting there and you're listening for the voice of the Spirit and what the Spirit would have for you to do. Now, another little tip that I want to give you, because you're going, okay, Gilbert, that makes sense. I could do 20 minutes at some point. And here's the deal. If you just simply say, I'll do 20 minutes at some point this week, you're not going to do it because you're so busy. So here's what you should do. Every single week, get out your calendar, your day timer, your phone, wherever you keep your appointments at. Actually schedule an appointment with Jesus. How many of you know that if you if Jesus in the flesh showed up and said, I want to meet with you Tuesday evening at 8, you would rearrange everything else in your life, wouldn't you? And you wouldn't be late for that appointment. And it doesn't matter who said, hey, I got something else I want to do Tuesday night at 8. You would say what? I'm sorry. I already have plans. I'm already booked. So literally what I'm saying to you is every single week you should schedule something on the calendar that this is the time with Jesus, with his Spirit, that I'm going to sit there and just sit and soak in his presence and enjoy my time with him. I'm just going to listen to see how it is that he's directing me. You're going, Gilbert, I've tried this before, but my mind wanders. Yeah, mind wanders. Those of you online, your mind wanders, right? In those moments, just keep remembering who it is that you're sitting there talking to or that you're taking a walk with. And I'm spending time with Jesus. And so sometimes I'll just close my eyes and I'll just whisper sort of, Jesus, Jesus, right? Sometimes I'm not going to do it. I'm going to spare you. But sometimes I'll sing a little bit, right? Again, I love you guys enough not to subject you to that. But there's some old like praise courses that from many years ago, like when I first got saved, just talking about Jesus or just talking about the Spirit, and so I'll just keep sort of just singing those things over and over and over again, just reminding me of what it is that I'm doing. And the more you do it, the better you'll get. The first time you try it, it's going to be really hard, and you're going to be like, okay, is it 20 minutes yet? But you want to get to the place where, have you ever been in something where you're like, oh my goodness, like 3 hours just passed and I don't even know where the time went? Eventually, you'll get to the place with Jesus that it's the same thing, that you're like, I'm just so enjoying spending time with him and listening to the voice of the Spirit that, oh my goodness, I actually went past 20 minutes. It was a half hour, it was 40 minutes, whatever. So don't beat yourself up. Again, if you start beating yourself up because of, your mind's getting distracted, that's Satan doing that. Because Satan doesn't want you spending time with Jesus. He doesn't want you listening to the voice of the Spirit. And so again, just sit and continue to listen to the Spirit's prompting, whether it's who you need to eat with or who you need to bless. Maybe it's a sin that's going on that you need to confess. Maybe the Spirit's just going to encourage you. Hey, you're doing great. And the Spirit's just for like 20 minutes going to give you a rah-rah session. And you're like, cool. God is pleased with who I am and what it is that I'm doing. But whatever it is, just make sure that you're following the Holy Spirit's prompting. Look at Romans chapter 8, verse 5. The Apostle Paul says this: those who are dominated by the sinful nature think about what? They think about sinful things. But those who are controlled by the Spirit think about things that do what? They think about things that please the Spirit. And so maybe that's what you pray as you go in to this 20 minutes of listening. Just simply, Spirit, reveal to me during these next 20 minutes, what is it this week that I could do that would please you? Because I want my mind to be renewed. I want my mind to be your mind. So what is it that you would have me to do? Who is it that you want me to eat with? Who is it that you want me to bless? Again, as the Spirit then reveals those things, we've been talking about this the last couple of weeks, and it came back from our Reveal study, that we then got to put our faith in action. It's great that you've heard from the Spirit, but now you actually have to do something about it. Put your faith into action. Actually do it. And when it comes to the context of this particular series, I've been thinking about, well, why is it that maybe we don't always put our faith into action? Why aren't we evangelistic believers? And this is just a theory. I'm not saying that, this is gospel or whatever, but I'm just saying here's a theory for you. When it comes to like isolating ourselves from unbelievers, that's really easy. Right? That, okay, I'm a Christian now, and I don't want to be corrupted by the big bad world that's out there. Because remember, Jesus said to be in the world, but not of the world. But that's hard. That's tricky to find that balance between how am I in the world, but I'm not of the world. So again, many Christians go, well, I'll just like separate myself from the world altogether. I'll just get rid of all the unbelievers around me. I only hang out in little holy huddles with other Christians. That's easy. You know what else is easy? Going to the opposite extreme and saying, well, I'm just going to be in the world. I'm going to live like the world does. Oh, yes, sure. Maybe morally I'm a little bit better. I don't quite do those types of sins that those people do. But for the most part, you look exactly like your unsaved neighbor, your unsaved coworker. The only real difference is that you happen to show up at a church for Sunday morning for an hour. Well, that's not right either. Again, to surprise the world, we need to be living our lives in such a way that the unsaved look at us and they go, wow, there is something different about you. And when they say something different, they're saying it in a good way. Not that yeah, I know there's something different. You're one of those weird Christians, right? If they're doing that, that means you're probably one of those isolationists that you've so isolated yourself that when you are around unbelievers, they're going, wow, you're really weird. But you need to be living in such a way that people are like, wow, whatever you have, I want that. You're living differently than what I am. And I want that in my life. And so again, this whole balance of between being isolated or then totally embracing what the things of the world are, that's a tricky balance to have. You know, how do I spend time with unbelievers so that I'm making an influence on them more so than they're making an influence on me? That's tricky. So here's how this applies to what we're talking about here this morning. I'm not smart enough to figure out that balance myself. You're probably not either. And so that's why we've constantly got to be asking the Spirit of God, speak to me right now. Am I too far to isolation? Am I too far to embracing? Help me to find that balance, to be in the world but not of the world. And again, I am not smart enough to figure out where that balance is. I need the Spirit of God helping me to do that. And I'm encouraging you to do the same thing, and then make whatever course corrections the Spirit happens to point out. All right, so the next habit, let's actually do all of them. So letter B is what? Bless, right. Every single week we are going to bless 3 people. It's a habit. We're going to get into a habit, blessing 3 people every week. Then the letter E stands for eat. What are we going to do? We're going to eat with at least 3 people, okay? Then we're going to take how many minutes per week? About 20 minutes a week. We're going to get this habit of I'm going to sit and soak in God's presence. Again, this is completely separate than your daily prayer life. You should be praying every single day. This is a separate time of just listening prayer that you're going to do. Then the next letter, L, stands for learn. That is, and this is on your outline, I'll spend at least one period of the week learning about Jesus. Now, in the same way that the listening time wasn't your normal prayer life, this learning isn't your normal devotional life either. You should every day be jumping into the scripture. And, you're reading a scripture, you're reading a little devotional, whatever. And that could be Old Testament, that could be New Testament, whatever you want it to be. What I'm talking about here is you're going to take another 20-minute block. And you're just simply going to read about Jesus in the 4 Gospels. Just 20 minutes straight. This isn't the time that you're studying. This is just reading about Jesus. Because the more we get to know Jesus, read about Jesus, we get to see the things that he said and what he was doing. And the more we spend time with him in that way, the more we start to become like him. How many of you ever noticed that about yourself, or you've seen that maybe in your kids or your grandkids, or just anybody, that you start hanging out with a new group, and all of a sudden you're starting to use the same types of like jokes that they do and the language and I'm not saying that necessarily that they're bad jokes or bad language. I'm just saying, the phrases and the various things that they do, you become like the people that you spend the most time with. And so what I'm saying to you is we need to spend a lot of time with Jesus. We need to be reading about Jesus to the point that we're so immersed in who he is that we're like, oh, I'm actually saying what Jesus would say, and I'm doing the things Jesus would do. It's because I'm hanging out with them so often and so much. You can't help but be changed anytime you're with Jesus. Here's another thing that just sitting and reading the Gospels for 20 minutes at a time are going to do for you. And that is, as evangelistic believers, you're going to become better equipped to fulfill your mission. Remember, both Peter and Paul said, look, you should always be ready to give an answer for the hope that you have inside of you. Well, the more time you're reading about Jesus and knowing who Jesus is, the easier it's going to be to answer those questions when people say, what's different about you? What is it that you have? You're going to be able to share more articulately then your faith and that Jesus has changed me. Notice I didn't say that you're going to give a gospel presentation. All you're doing is you're telling your own story of here's how Jesus changed me. Now, just a little FYI, to read through the Gospels, if you're the average reading speed, will take you about 9 hours. So I'm encouraging you 20 minutes a week. So if you do the math there, you're going to read all the way through all 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You'll read through those twice a year or so. That's pretty cool. Reading through the Gospels twice a year. Now you start multiplying that out by, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. So just keep reading through. And obviously you don't have to stop at 20 minutes. You can read the Gospels every single month if you want. Whatever's comfortable for you. I'm saying at least 20 minutes. Make this a habit. Spend time with Jesus in addition to your normal daily devotions that you're doing every single day. Now, there's a third reason you should do this, and it's somewhat a combination of the first two, and that is that, many Christians, if you ask them, like say an unbeliever, said, tell me about Jesus, you'd be able to spout off sort of Jesus' greatest hits, so to speak. Right? You know the Christmas story, so you could, tell some of the details of that. You know about Easter, the death and the resurrection of Jesus, so you could tell some of that. And then there's probably a favorite parable of Jesus that you have, maybe a favorite miracle of Jesus that you have. So you know some things sort of intellectually, and you'd be able to share that with them. But the goal isn't, as Christians, that one day you're able to pass a theological exam. You're not going to stand before God when you get to heaven and he goes, okay, here's your quiz that you got to take. So it's not about just getting intellectual knowledge. It's about that you've been changed by Jesus. And the reason that we want to keep reading through the Gospels over and over and over again is get to a place where you're able to figure out, okay, this is what Jesus wants from me. This is what Jesus wants me to do. Here's how Jesus wants me to think and act, what he wants me to do. And so we've got to know the Gospels forwards and backwards. And the only way to do that is just keep reading them over and over and over and over again. Again, not so you get intellectual knowledge, but so that as you're reading about who Jesus was, it starts to change who you are as well. See, when it comes to sharing our faith, a lot of times we think that it's about, well, people have to come to me. And if somebody comes to me, then okay, yeah, I'll do something. But what we get from Jesus, the example, and you'll get this as you read through the Gospels over and over, is that Jesus was always going to people. Jesus was always the one initiating the relationships. He wasn't isolating himself. He didn't build a big building and say, this is the quote unquote church. Now you guys all come to me. No, what did Jesus do? He went out. In fact, even his own birth is that story, right? That God became one of us. God came to us. It wasn't about us going to God. God came to us as a little baby. And then Jesus, at the age of 30, as he begins his public ministry, he's going out amongst the people. He's building relationships with the unbelievers. He wasn't like, okay, look, you first believe, then you can belong to us. And he said, let's hang out. This is what we talked about last week, right? The eating thing. Let's hang out. Let's be in community together. And then conversion will happen later. Come in and belong with what we're doing, this movement that we have. And then you'll get to the place of belief as you hang out with me, he says. And so I'm encouraging you, don't isolate yourself. You need to get out. Look, I love what we do here on Sundays. It's great. But this is not the church. This is a part of church, the gathering together of God's people to celebrate what he's been doing all week long. And we sing and we praise and we get into the word. That's a part of church. But we are the church. That's what You Matter has been about all these years. That it's not just about coming to church on Sundays. It's about us being the church out in the community all week long. And notice I said out in the community. We don't ask people to come here so that we can do ministry. We go to where they're at and do ministry. And where is that ministry? Do we have another building somewhere else that we do that? No. You are the ministry. Wherever people live, work, and play, that's where you're to be doing ministry. So in your neighborhood, you're doing ministry. At your work, you're doing ministry. Your hobbies, wherever the play, the gym, those types of things, you're doing ministry. Remember, we're all full-time ministers of the gospel. And so we got to continue to learn about Jesus. Because again, as we learn about him, we'll start to act like him. We'll start to go and do things like he did and make a difference in people's lives. We've got to live amongst the people in the world. No wonder Jesus says this in John chapter 15, verses 4-5. It says, "Remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it's severed from the vine. And you cannot be fruitful unless you do what? You can't be fruitful unless you remain in me," he says. He says, "Yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce what? Much fruit." And then he says this, "For apart from me, you can do nothing." Apart from me, you can do nothing. You want to make a difference for Jesus? You want to be an evangelistic believer? You can't do that. Only Jesus in you can do that. And so he says, look, you remain in me, I will remain in you, and together we'll make a difference and we'll change the world. So here's what I'm going to encourage you to do. Just get as much of Jesus as you can. Read through the Gospels. Listen to sermons. Watch some listen to some podcasts. Watch some YouTube videos. Watch the Chosen TV show. Just get as much of Jesus as you possibly can. Because the more you immerse yourself into him, the more you're going to act like him and think like him and speak like him and love like Jesus. And the more you do that, the more you'll be able to share the hope that you have inside of you. Now, as I begin to wrap up, I want to share with you one of the stories that was in the Surprise the World book that Michael Frost wrote. He said that one time he was out and he was speaking to a group of Christian surfers. And he asked them at one point, he said, so tell me, who is your favorite surfer? And he said it was like amazing. They almost like attacked him by going, Kelly Slater, Kelly Slater, Kelly Slater, Kelly. I mean, like everybody in the group. There was a couple others that had other ones, but like almost everybody in the group were talking about Kelly Slater. Now, if you're like me, I've actually, I've heard that name before, that, okay, he's like this famous surfer, but I didn't know anything, about Kelly Slater. You probably don't know anything about him either. Michael Frost was the same way. So he said, after I'm like, this crowd's almost like attacking me with the Kelly Slater, Kelly Slater. He's like, okay, whoa, tell me, this guy must be something else, huh? So tell me about him. And he said they actually got even more excited. And they're shouting out all of Kelly Slater's accomplishments, his facts and figures about his life and career. Kelly Slater was an 11-time world champion, which is the most ever. He won 5 consecutive world championships in the mid-90s. He's both the youngest world champion ever at the age of 20 and then the oldest world champion ever at the age of 39. They were telling him things like he grew up in Cocoa Beach. They knew what brands of surfboards he used and the wax that he uses and all those types of things. He said they even knew things like here's the TV shows he had been on and the movies he had been in and the actresses and the models that he had dated. I mean, they're just throwing out all this stuff about Kelly Slater. They're so excited about Kelly Slater. And then he said, a little bit later, he asked him, he said, so tell me what do you know about Jesus? And he said it was amazing, the shift. Because when they were talking about Kelly Slater. They were animated and they were like just so into it. And he said, intellectually, they knew a lot of stuff about Jesus, but it came off very dry. They knew Jesus, quote unquote, greatest hits. And in the book, he says, look, we as evangelistic believers, we need to get to the place where we talk about Jesus in the same way that these surfers talked about Kelly Slater. In fact, I have the quote from him here in the book. Look at it. He says, when we live questionable lives, people should see our strange behavior and ask us about our motivations. And then we should be able to speak about Jesus the way surfers would speak about Kelly Slater, with energy and enthusiasm, with reverence and awe, with delight and wonder. So what about you? If your coworker tomorrow at the office or your neighbor tonight asked you, who is this Jesus? Would it come off dry and very intellectual? Or would you speak about Jesus in the way the surfers talked about Kelly Slater? And listen, this isn't a fake emotion of being excited about it. You're going to get excited about Jesus the more you sit and listen to him, the more you sit and you learn about him. You immerse yourself in Jesus. And you're just going to be like talking about him as if though he were your friend, because he is your best friend. You're going to talk about him with awe and reverence. You're going to talk about him as your hero. You're going to talk about him as your king. But that doesn't happen unless you sit and you listen. And it doesn't happen unless you're intentionally sitting and learning about him. So let's review one more time. Remember, this isn't every week. Okay, Gilbert preached something, so I'm going to do it this week. And then the next week, these are habits that we're going to get into. So the letter B stands for, they're not going to put it on screen, so don't look at the screen. You're not getting cheats. I saw everybody's eyes go up like, oh. All right, so B stands for bless. And you're going to bless how many people? 3 people every single week. 1 person from here at Exponential, 1 unbeliever, and then a random one of your choice. Letter E stands for eat. What are you going to do? Eat with 3 people, of which at least one's an unbeliever. Letter L, the first one stood for listen, right? You're going to listen at least 20 minutes every single week for the voice of the Spirit. This isn't you praying and telling God all the stuff that you need and that you want. This is simply listening. Listen, 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 listen. Sit and soak in his presence. And then the other L stood for learn. You're going to take 20 minutes. You're just going to read through the Gospels. Just keep reading and reading and reading and reading until you become more and more like the one that you're reading about. That makes sense? All right, next week then we'll come back. We'll actually wrap up the series by looking at what the letter S is. I'm not going to spoil it, even though we had it on the screen. Anybody remember? Get extra credit. Anybody remember? Yeah, I hear a couple people yelling it out. Sent, right? So there you go. Spoiler alert. Next week we're going to talk about being sent for Jesus and exactly what that means. But until then, let's pray. Father, thank you so much for this day and this opportunity we've had to come together and to just learn more and more about you and what it is that you would have for us to do. And Lord, these are habits that we just need to start to implement into our lives. And so, Lord, I pray that we would actually put our faith into action, that we would be blessing people every single week, showing them that you matter to God and you matter to us as well, and that we would be intentionally eating and using our eating time as a strategic way, really, to help further your kingdom. But Father, again, we're not going to be evangelistic believers and be effective in that unless we are taking the time just to listen and to learn from you. The blessing and the eating, those are not tasks that we're doing. They should be natural byproducts that come out of our lives because we've spent so much time in your presence. And that you are our hero. We're like, I want to become more like Jesus. And so if Jesus blessed people and Jesus was eating with people, I'm going to do that. Not because Gilbert said to do it, not even because the Word of God says that we should do it. I'm doing it simply because that's what I want to do. I want to do it because that's who Jesus was. That's what Jesus was all about. And Lord, you said that if we'll do that, if we'll remain in you, and you in us, that we will produce much fruit. Father, I'm so excited about that, that even people that don't have a spiritual gift of evangelism can produce much fruit. See people come into relationship with you and grow in their relationship with you just simply because they're becoming like you. And so help us to do that, Jesus. Thank you that you're changing us more and more in your image and likeness. Help us to do our part just by simply spending time with you. I pray all these things in your precious and holy name. Amen.